down. I'm going to ask you to come forward now to read the tribute for Rory.
I am both honoured and it is a pleasure to give a tribute to Rory. Rory, as you can see, was born in London on the 22nd of June 1934 to Robert and Theodora McCrory. He was an only child and by all accounts had a far from happy childhood. At the start of the war, for safety, he was sent to a family farm in Ireland. In their turn, the cousins he had there were sent to Canada for safety, so his loneliness continued. A school report dated only 1939, but when it says he was 4 years old, remarks that he was easily led into mischief. This showed, to me at any rate, the start of his capacity for practical jokes and general interest in life, which lasted right to the end. Later, Rory won a scholarship to Shrewsbury. He volunteered to be in charge of stoking the boilers, which meant that at least he had some bodily warmth during the cold winters. He completed his school certificate early and went straight to Sandhurst, and at Her Majesty's coronation he helped to line the route. At Sandhurst, he showed his academic prowess and came top in the exams, but he was positioned third overall. One suspects that he has a slightly different attitude to life, even at that stage. He was commissioned into the Royal Enniskillen Fusiliers and subsequently went with them to Kenya to help deal with the Mau Mau. After that, the army appeared to have come to their collective senses, for they sent Rory to St John's, Cambridge, to read engineering. This was the start of being able to enjoy himself and to make lifelong friends. A passionate oarsman, he wrote for Lady Margaret, the name of John's Boat Club, of the John's Boat Club, and became the Boat Club secretary. The day that his finals were over, he went out celebrating with friends, and at least one of whom is here today. After visiting all the pubs in King Street, and I believe there were 7, they decided to finish off at the Quayside Mess, which was the watering hole for the Officers' Training Corps in Cambridge. The door was locked. Many people were partying on the first floor. So, Rory being Rory, shinned up a drain pipe to bang on a window and ask them to let in his little party. Whilst up the pipe, and to steady himself, he grabbed the mess sign to allow a free hand to alert his potential hosts. Regrettably, the sign came away in his hand and he fell, landing on his head. He was taken to Addenbrooke's and was in a coma for a month. This was the cause of his everlasting deafness. Still in his hospital bed, he decided to discharge himself and attend Henley. When he walked into the enclosure, his friends could not recognize him. He still looked absolutely dreadful. However, this was just a measure of the man and his priorities. In 1958, invalided out of the army, he searched for a job and joined Wimpy Construction. In 1962, at a 12th night party in Manchester, Rory met Jenny. It is said that he wowed her with a recitation of the Wreck of the Deutschland by Gerard Manley Hopkins. History does not tell us whether it was all 35 verses. Not quite. Thank you. However, for Jenny it was love at first sight. They married in 1965, Jenny seeing in him a man of integrity, intelligence, and that indefinable Irish charm. Rob arrived in 1966 and January in 1968. In 1963, Rory saw an advertisement for an engineer at Rugby Portland Cement. Being very impressed by the prospects, he joined the company. He was sent to Trinidad as works manager in 1970, and after 2 tours, the family moved back to England in 1974 and settled in Flatney. and Melanie was born in 1982. Rory went up the RPC ladder, eventually becoming chief engineer, and he was an excellent engineer and achieved much, mostly by his own efforts. For instance, he secured planning permission for a new cement works at Rugby. Later, he obtained a new license for chalk extraction at the Rochester Works, and these were no mean feats, even in those days. However, as chief engineer, he was also given a white Rover to drive between the various works. Apparently, when the family went on holiday to France with it, the French were very impressed with the car's style and crowded round it saying, "It's belle." On Rory's retirement, the McCrorys became somewhat peripatetic. They moved back to Rugby from Flecknoe and then to Kilsby. After that, they went to Burton Dasset, where Rory kept a flock of some 20 or 30 sheep. He even attended the new lambs when they appeared at the dead of night. From there, it was Aberley, where he joined the Lunar Society in Birmingham, and he was events secretary for the Hereford and Worcester branch of the Cambridge Society. Finally, they returned to Flecknoe. Everywhere they went, Rory had his shed in which he would do his woodwork. Rory was a master both of detail and of the written word. But like many a good leader, he did not suffer fools gladly. It is said that in negotiating a new gas contract with Texaco whilst in Trinidad, he pushed them rather too hard to clear up one detail after another. Their reply was, "Take it or leave it." But I'm sure they were not used to dealing with anybody with his towering intellect. Rory and Jenny met Elle and me at Port of Spain's airport in October '71, just under 50 years ago. He must have wondered what head office had sent him. However, we've been firm friends ever since. Whilst there, Rory and Jenny and Elle and I played quite a bit of bridge. What with miscalling and often not having the correct number of cards, it was great fun. Not Pucker English Bridge Union. Some years later, after Elle and I had returned to England, having also served a year at Rugby's Australian works, we produced a son. Rory and Jenny kindly consented to become godparents to Patrick, and when we moved to Bedford, sometimes if Rory had been to visit the RPC Cambridge works, he would visit us on his way home. When Patrick produced sons of his own, he called the second one Rory. And incidentally, our grandson Rory is 9 years old today. From my own viewpoint, he was definitely the most technically competent boss that I ever had. Before going to Trinidad, I'd been told that Rory was really live wire, but it took me a little time to appreciate the huge qualities he possessed. Eventually, he gave me a fairly free hand, both on the electrical side and with kiln burning, and so long as I took him with me, all was fine. But his intellect and memory were such that if any two of my explanations did not match entirely, prolonged discussion would result, and he was always right. The parties, or fêtes, as they were called, were great fun, and Rory and Jenny always joined in with gusto. In Trinidad, Carnival is celebrated every year on the Monday and Tuesday before Ash Wednesday. One year, Rory refused to play Mass in costume, so he was dressed in shorts with a skirt made of ties and entered as Miss Thailand. As you will know, Rory was a great raconteur with a superbly dry sense of humour. We have one particular memory of him, most probably in the early hours, where he was talking to a chap, drink tucked under his arm as usual. He was not unknown to sway on his toes whilst delivering one of his, albeit fairly long, anecdotes. After a bit, the motion started to mesmerise the poor chap. Eventually he succumbed, fell over backwards, fortunately onto a sofa. It's very difficult not to laugh. We are told of another and later snapshot. Amongst other things, Rory was very good at doing press-ups from the standing position and then returning upright. One day, whilst he and his daughters were in town, they were on a pavement, he started the routine, but failed to get up. He could not. But Jekka and Melanie were so convulsed with laughter that they were unable to help him. Imagine passers-by wondering what on earth was happening, a man lying on the pavement and two young ladies in hysterics. In the end, they hauled him up. Again, when Jenny's Aunt Rue was living with them, at one dinner time, Rory spilled some gravy on his tie. Rue immediately wanted to clean it up for him. Miraculously, a pair of scissors appeared from the pocket, and he cut his tie in half. What a man. Final anecdote from his early days when at Rochester. He had opened account with South Eastern Gas Board. The first bill he was sent was addressed to the occupier. So he promptly wrote out a cheque to them and signed it, the occupier. He received a very apologetic letter back from them, returning the cheque and asking for another. Half the delight in this, actually, is the courtesy with which they replied. Certainly not these days. Both my father and grandfather were fond of this particular homily. It runs, "He has achieved success who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much, who has gained the respect of intelligent men and the love of little children, who has filled his niche and accomplished his task, and who has left the world better than he found it." In modern parlance, Rory ticks all those boxes. Rory was much loved by Jenny and his children and his grandchildren. For what more can a man